We're live. We're live. Welcome everyone, wherever you're joining on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, here on Riverside. Welcome everyone to today's panel. I'm Marc from 51. We are a research media company for digital assets. We equip corporates and technology leaders with insights and narratives they need to lead. And today's panel, in collaboration with Avalanche, is about a big shift that's happening right now under the surface, and we call it the new entertainment economy. Streaming platforms, labels, and studios still dominate the market, but technology like blockchain is changing how they get funded, distributed, and monetized. And this is not just about NFTs. For those of you who've been following us for a while, we wrote a lot about NFTs a couple of years ago, but this is not about NFTs anymore and not about hype cycles. This is real infrastructure that's being built here. We're just published a full report together with Avalanche. The ones who are joining today, you'll get your hands on first on exactly this topic. And the more exciting thing now is the guests that we have today on this panel and who make it happen in real life. We're actually building this stuff. Welcome everyone. First, we have Meg Rodriguez. He's the founder and CEO of Even, a platform powering music drops where artists can earn up to 10x or 50x more than traditional streaming. Then we have Billy Huang, CEO of Insomnia Labs and co-founder of CreatorFi, an infrastructure layer that helps brands and creators launch tokenized IP at scale. And then we have Marc Iserlis, head of film at Republic, who's helping fans to invest directly into movies and bringing on-chain ownership into the traditional entertainment world. So welcome everyone, super excited to have you here.
Thank you very much for having us. Excited to be here.
Likewise.
All right, so for everyone who's joining on whatever channel you are, you can comment, you can ask questions. We see that here on the chat, and we'll have a short Q&A at the end. Do that, feel free to interact. That's why we're here today. And I want to start with the first question for Meg. Meg, you've been in the music industry for a very long time. What are artists telling you today that they weren't telling you 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, I was literally just having a conversation about this right before I jumped on. I think what's interesting is like the metric of success has changed. I started in the industry 14 years ago as a manager. And 14 years ago, the metric of success for artists essentially was releasing the music and ending up on streaming platforms. And at the time, this was like Pandora, the early days of Spotify. And this is where like platforms like CD Baby and TuneCore, where you would partner with them and like you can have your music on Spotify and then show your friends and family and say, look, I just released my music. I think now the metric of success over the span of, I would say in the last 10 years, and really the last 5 years, the metric of success is, are you making money from your music? I think before it was really about distribution. We were coming from the drop off of sales in music because of piracy in the early 2000s. And it just turned into distribution. Social media really picked up. Discovery switched from your traditional streaming platforms into now discovery happening on social media, where artists want to see themselves as businesses and they want to be able to own the relationship with their fans, but more importantly, they want to be able to make a living from the music that they're making or the content that they're creating. So I think that's probably the most fascinating thing. The amount of, even again, 5 years ago, I had the amount of artists that are like, I want 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify, or I want to end up on New Music Friday or Rap Caviar, or whatever the playlist is. Now, the amount of artists are like, how can I make my first $10,000 from music, or my first $1,000 from music? That ends up being the first point that, artists are really focusing on. And that's exciting for us, just because that is our, that's really where the thesis of Even came from, where let's really redefine what success looks like for artists and let's help them actually earn revenue, money, collect their fan data, but then more importantly, build a sustainable career. Hopefully that makes sense. You're on mute, Mark.
Yeah. Meg, makes sense, and thanks for explaining that. Mark, turning to you with the same question, what signals did you get from the movie film audience that showed you or made you confident that fans would actually fund entire films?
So there's a few signals across the audience and the film industry as well. So I mean, background sort of macro larger on the film industry, we've been seeing sort of changes, disruption, decline for a while now. Audiences are sort of starting to tire of the franchise sequels, remakes, algorithms. People complain about the watered down quality on the streamer platforms, and in general, that's a lot because the industry itself is also in a state of sort of disruption and risk aversion. It becomes more expensive to make a film. People want to take less risks. And as a result, sort of, that glorious day of film in the 90s where you had, American Psycho, Fight Club, like, well, those are books, but I mean, like, just Being John Malkovich, Eternal Sunshine, like The Matrix, all these huge original IPs. We see sort of less in those being made today. And so, the film industry, there's only really two ways to make a film. There's, turning to high net worth individuals who you maybe meet on a yacht at Cannes or something like this, to say, hey, let's you can fund private equity into the next film, or you take your film in its early stages to a big studio, or a streamer, and get the whole thing funded by them, but then they keep all of the upside, they own it all in perpetuity. So for a while now, the film industry has sort of needed a new channel or an additional channel to finance films, and audiences, the more that they can get involved and be a part of a film early, not only is that, ultra fandom, but that's also then allowing their favorite artist or filmmaker to fully control their IP, their process, make the film independently, and then have more leverage when they go to sell their film to a distributor or a buyer, because they own it all, they have a finished product, they can be a bidding war. And then you've also got a built-in audience who are going to be proving that, there is an audience for this film already. So ideally, more original films get made with a built-in audience and with better economics, where everybody gets to share in that upside because you own your film. And so, audiences, retail investors, fans, they've never had the opportunity before to really get in on these previously, gate-kept opportunities, investment opportunities into film. And so what Republic does with its, with its securities licenses, with its regulatory infrastructure that allows for everyday unaccredited investors all over the world to finally invest into these, previously inaccessible asset classes, for both sides, it's really, really a welcome disruption to the film financing model and to even allowing more creativity to flourish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mark, just a follow-up question here. Today in film financing, or traditionally, who made that money? Who profited from those huge revenues? Like if you look at the latest movie, F1 by Brad Pitt, I think there was a massive marketing machine together with Apple and Formula One itself, and they invested about 200 million and made 600-700 million, 800 million in box office sales alone. Who's profiting from that now, and what does need to change?
Yeah, so look, I like to break the film industry down into like kind of three buckets. You've got your or two buckets really, but three buckets I think, because you've got your F1s, your Harry Potter franchises, all these big films. Those are studio films. Studios like Universal, Sony, Warner Brothers, etc. They often control end to end, from distribution, from development to distribution, the investment and the marketing process. So, with something like F1, that was commission, that was the studio involved was Apple, and they paid for the whole thing. They spent the marketing dollars, and they really got the revenues. People like maybe Brad Pitt or Plan B and things like that, they would have had just sort of very high fees within the large budget of the film. There could have been some back-end sharing structure as well, but usually when it goes to a streamer, you're not really dependent on box office, theatrical upside. You've got the streamer investing in the IP of that film to bring users to their platform. Same with Netflix and all the other streamers. Obviously, in other situations like a film that goes into a similar big IP film that goes to the theaters, you're going to invest into the development of the film, the production budget, which can be, 1 to 200 like a million like a Marvel film, another additional spend on top for marketing, which is pretty sizable too. But then you hope that the movie will gross $1 billion in the theaters and continue to live on and have franchise value. So again, that's mostly the studio taking the profits. That's the first sort of bucket, studio films. Second bucket is independent films. These are films which are maybe more between the $2 and $20 million budget, which are outside of the studio system. They take private equity capital to invest into the equity of that film. Equity meaning that it's a revenue sharing model where you own a piece of the net profits of that film in perpetuity. So ideally, if it's a $10 million film, let's say, you might get 50 or 60 even percent of the film's costs in soft money. So like tax credits, come and film in Louisiana or Georgia, we'll give you 30, 40 cents back on the dollar. Or foreign pre-sales where you've got the distribution rights of that film, and a sales company will basically sell off territories saying, okay, Europe might buy this film for XYZ. So the people in that equity bucket of a $10 million film, that could be private equity, high net worth individuals, in our case now, retail investor fans as well, who get to participate in the investment of that film and then share in the theatrical upside. So if you take a movie like Slumdog Millionaire or even Paranormal Activity or one of these films that were made for low budget and then grossed hundreds of millions in the back end, those people did very well as equity investors into successful independent films that became franchises, etc. The third bucket really is just television. Television, sometimes an episode of Succession, right? That would cost 10 million an episode. 10 times 10 episodes at 10 million. You're not going to independently really finance a $100 million TV show. You're going to develop a script or IP or whatever, and you're going to take that to an HBO or Netflix, and then together partnering with them, they'll pay for the budget for their audience. So that's sort of the third bucket, TV. But yes, usually it's the studios, to answer your questions, that would capture the revenues and profits on the big franchise IP, and then the independent film, where similar to Venture, you're hoping for that one unicorn that has this landfall of theatrical upside.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marc. And now, Billy, you've been in the Web3 space for a while. Insomnia Labs has created great stuff for years. You really understand crypto, blockchain, NFT culture. And now you created CreatorFi, and you work with top creators, you work with top IP brands. What signals did you see in the market, or what made you create CreatorFi?
So I think there's really a couple of signals that were particularly interesting to me. I think one is that the IP market is really fragmented. Like, yes, you have, film studios, maybe media companies going around like buying them, but just because you buy them doesn't mean you have a strategy, right? Like on top of them. And so that was one thing that was very interesting. The second is that, you really have, since, YouTube really started becoming big, I think it was like 2006, 2007, anybody with a camera, with a home studio can now create IP. And so like you now have almost like this like homegrown movement, the people decide, what type of IP should be monetized, what type of IP have sticking power. And it's no longer, let's say just driven by studios. And there's still absolutely a place for studios, but now everybody can also do it. So you kind of have this like mishmash of like IP that's homegrown that get bought, and then you have like private equity firms that are coming in. But really where we thrive is on the debt side. And so we like to think about debt very interestingly because debt moves faster. It's kind of the fastest form of capital, right? You have a maturity period, you know what your collateral is, you're able to deploy it a lot faster. And that's really where we play. So CreatorFi effectively is like a debt platform, and we move really fast in terms of financing, great IP that is coming in, let's say that are trending, that we think have staying power, and really where we can have strategic value. And for those of you who don't know, like Insomnia Labs, like we first started working with a bunch of brands, right? So like our first client was Under Armour and Steph Curry, where we created this shoe that you could use to walk across in Sandbox and Decentraland. And so now it's very full circle for me as I'm starting to financing, a lot of these IP, but then also being able to go to brands and say, hey, look at all these IP that, are great, that have the specific audiences that you need, and being able to kind of marry those, right? And we think that that network of, brands able to find the right audiences, of IP being homegrown and native and authentic really helps with kind of the way that these IP will be positioned in the future. And what we really want to act as is kind of that network of that facilitation. And having capital to help these creators, artists, game developers grow their IP, and then also being able to find them new revenues.
And follow-up question on that, Billy, where does now blockchain come in all of that?
So very interestingly, we actually didn't originally we were saying, okay, we're financing IP, like, do we actually need blockchain? It was like a very fundamental question for us. But really, because of the way that credit is structured, a lot of our creators ask us to get funded in stablecoins. And we, even today, around like 70 to 80%, especially of global creators, ask us to pay them in stables because it's instantly settled. It goes directly to your wallet. They don't have to wait for, banks to clear it on my side and then their side, and that's going to take 2 weeks, and maybe they don't get it, and then they're really worried about it or frustrated. Creators are moving really fast. Their production cycles are very, very quick. Every 2 weeks you have to push an update. Let's say you're a Roblox game. Every 4 weeks, you probably have like 4 to 6 episodes come out on YouTube, right? So like when you need the money, you need the money. And I think what we're really solving there is that efficiency, leveraging blockchain to have this like global payment rail that enables us to get them the funding that they need to grow their businesses.
Thank you, Billy. Mag, back to you. You mentioned at the beginning that you created that new model. Payouts are much higher for artists that work with you than they would earn over Spotify. Can you walk us a little bit through how this works? How can an artist earn 10 to 50 times more through Even than on Spotify?
Well, I think the model is different. There's a couple of things to consider. I think when it comes to Even, and just for context, what we do at Even is we're helping artists, labels, distributors essentially sell music directly to fans before it's made available on streaming platforms. So, tied to kind of like Mark, what he was mentioning, we're the movie theater premiere essentially if Spotify was Netflix. It's not Even or streamers. It's Even and streaming essentially. And the way that it works is with Even, especially when we think about music, in many ways, music is very much community driven. It's fandom driven. In many ways, it could also be parasocial in the sense that it doesn't really require buy-in from the artist themselves. Fans essentially build their own subcultures and communities around a specific artist or a body of work. So the biggest opportunity that we saw is that we should be selling music, and in particularly selling music with community is really what we do. And we offer that infrastructure for labels and distributors to be able to offer that to their artists. And the way that it works is you're essentially selling access to an album or a body of work anywhere between, again, 7 to 30, 60, 90 days. And in some cases, the artists aren't releasing on streaming platforms. They're only releasing direct to fan. What we're noticing is the average fan is paying close to $20 to get access to an album. But again, it comes with community proximity, not only to the artist, but then also other fans. And then we're also now exploring non-music releases with artists that have short films. We did a short film with Smino, a short film with Black. J. Cole released his podcast. We're starting to see these non-music releases. Since traditionally an artist releases an album once a year, this offers an opportunity for artists to explore other mediums that they traditionally wouldn't. And the way that it ends up working is artists are being paid daily for daily revenue. They also own the relationship with their fans. And it's not just on platform, it could be off platform. They get emails, phone numbers, consumption. All of the data is essentially made available to them, which traditionally artists have never seen before. Even some of our biggest artists on the platform are growing their mailing and text list by 15 times by simply using Even. So it does offer an opportunity, of course, revenue, fan engagement, but the way I lead or the way that I talk about Even to our partners is lead with engagement first and commerce second. And that is what I believe the biggest opportunity in music and in content in general. So hopefully that makes sense.
Makes sense. And how does blockchain play into all of this?
Yeah, so we don't really talk about the blockchain elements of Even. We've never really talked about it, and we were doing it before it was cool not to talk about it. The simple answer is it was the easiest way for us to launch our MVP. It was just me and my co-founder. We didn't have a ton of funding, and building on the blockchain allowed us to not have to really build the back end. So we were onboarding users via email using Magic. And then when they bought a release, the smart contract deployed the content to their wallet, and that's how they were able to access the content. So the blockchain element for us, even to this day, is really security. Users are logging in either SMS or email. They're essentially creating a wallet. They don't see the wallet element to it, but this prevents users from sharing passwords because there is no passwords. Everything is two-factor authorization. When they buy a release, we release essentially a key that unlocks the content. So every time they want to play the music, the videos, the content, we're authenticating that that user actually owns access to that. And I think that, again, it's like the most non-sexy use case for blockchain, but for us, we use it for what it is. And we always talk about it, even to our partners, where the reason we don't talk about it is consumers don't care how it works. They just care that it works. And our partners equally feel the same way. So you won't see a token, you won't see anything fancy, you won't even see any blockchain elements. We do have some releases that enable crypto as a payment method, although most artists and teams aren't enabling that. And then I think additionally, one of the core parts of what we're doing, we serve artists now in over 110 countries. So paying them daily is one of the key things that keeps me up at night most days. And there is regions where paying artists or creators can be a little bit more difficult than others. So we are introducing USDC payouts, so allowing artists from around the world to get paid directly via USDC. So hopefully that all makes sense.
Cool, thanks, Meg. And I feel like, Mark, I have to ask you the same question. What role does blockchain play in all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot similar to what Mag said. And bless this community and forum and places like 51 that have .xyz in their emails. We get the blockchain thing, we get it, but the most of the world, especially the entertainment industry, is still very, very much not there, and still run away for the hills thinking it's NFTs and things like fart coins and stuff like that. But really, I'd say, the way so there's a few layers. I mean, really, Republic, of course, is a huge fintech company, fan investment platform with all of the regulatory licenses to accept investment security security issuance from to unaccredited investors around the world. So that was a big thing, obviously, when you're mentioning even in your introduction that tripped the whole world up with the NFT boom a couple of years ago. And in film and entertainment, you saw a lot of people sort of shilling NFTs, saying, hey, here's a movie that's 90 minutes, let's issue 90 NFTs and you get to own a profit share from that. Well, that NFT tripped securities laws in the US because you were issuing securities illegally, basically. It worked in my mind. I thought it was a little bit different with art and music. It's like in music, you put out a Steve Aoki NFT, great, that can be a backstage pass to his concert, and that's not promising any back end royalties, and he gets to still make his track, and so things like that. And then with art, an NFT could represent a fractional piece of a painting, let's say, and then that becomes like an appreciating asset. But when it comes to film, how do you get paid out from a film? In revenues from tickets? Those are securities, so that's clearly an investment contract. And so what's really new news here, of course, is that Republic has those licenses to finally accept investment from unaccredited US. Now the blockchain piece comes in because it's for efficiency and it's for tradability. When we're paying out revenues from a film or from a slate or anything to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, of course blockchain enables that kind of efficient payout without all the SWIFT fees and all that things. And of course, where tokenization is all really going is to create these secondary markets for private individuals as well. So if you have a share in the next American Psycho and it goes up in value, then you can trade your share of that revenue right in that film or slate or production company to another person. So that whole infrastructure, Republic has an ATS as well to allow for that secondary trading, and also accepting investments in stablecoin as well, so in USDC, and we can pay that out as well. So the last thing I'll say about sort of, when I try to explain blockchain to, Hollywood or entertainment people who are less familiar, because similar to Mag's point, it's like I say, you don't need to know how your Gmail works, it just needs to work, right? So we are sort of the blockchain efficiency rails. But I also like to think of it as like, I use the example of like a Soho House or a members club. Your NFT is your Soho House membership pass. That's, tap in, you can sell that on, etc. Utility tokens are like points you can spend at the Soho House. You can buy a smoothie, you can vote on what kind of game night or what kind of movie they play, things like that. And then your security token, which is obviously where the sort of the big barrier and where the next thing is going, is the ability for you to invest into the Soho House or create a new venture with the Soho House or whatever. Excuse the Soho House metaphor, but basically the three different flavors of token and how that all adds up to tokenization, at least in film and entertainment.
Yeah, and I think Netflix had an experiment 2 or 3 years ago where they started issuing NFTs for a series that they released on the platform. What do you think, Mark? What does it take until streaming platforms like Netflix, big movie studios understand this model and start applying this mainstream?
I mean, it's all different horses for courses. It's like, or different narratives and needs. So, for independent film, what is the biggest need is more ways of financing independent ideas outside of, the big corporate studio systems. So that's where you can use blockchain and obviously, security tokens to allow fans and new investment channels to come in to make more types of films with filmmakers. On our platform, Robert Rodriguez, action films. He's a maverick with his own studio. He said, hey, I'm going to allow my fans to come in, invest in a slate of films, and every fan that invests gets to pitch me a film as well as part of that slate. Eli Roth, who's raised, closed as well. He raised over $5 million from retail audiences to say, let's create a new horror studio where we can make all those disgusting horror films that the big studios never allowed me to make. And every fan gets to own equity in a new studio. Again, creativity and financing. For a big studio, though, however, like a Disney or Netflix or whatever, they might issue NFTs almost as a collectible, as a fan engagement play. Or they could even syndicate some of their budget. They have these huge budgets. Imagine what better fan engagement is there than to own a piece of your favorite IP. Let's say, the studio that created Barbie or whatever, the next one they're going to do franchises Hot Wheels. We all played with Hot Wheels as a kid. What if you could, allow that generation who played with Hot Wheels to say, hey, you get to be an investor, like you get to own $5 million of the equity of our next IP franchise. I mean, boom, first of all, that's an awesome opportunity. It's going to make the news. It's going to be like a marketing campaign, and it's going to syndicate some of their risk. So for big studios, again, tokenization, or the ability to allow retail investment could de-risk and also cause, be a fan engagement play. And then, so, NFTs that could be collectibles, utility tokens that could be fan engagement. Let's say you are a production company and you can allow maybe fans to vote with utility tokens on what gets greenlit next in the slate, or what kind of flavor of a trailer or character, whatever. So I like to think of this like sort of token trifecta being used for different narratives and needs.
We were talking a lot about participation now and fans being part of the success and engaging with those artists and movies, and how like in Web3 there was a lot of talk about that kind of model, and NFTs I think were the tool or instrument people try to play on that by starting to issue NFTs, making people part of that process, co-owners, and then engaging them in that way. How do you think can we take this model, or how mainstream can this model go? Is this something for all the fans? Is this something for a very niche audience that's super engaged, or is it somewhere in between?
Right. I mean, I think with the Film 3 movement, at least a few years ago, it was to an earlier point very focused on, well, it was using NFTs, which sort of, even you saw that with Stoner Cats and things like that, sort of didn't do it properly with the right regulatory framework and promised securities when they shouldn't have off of NFTs. Security tokens are different, and you have this token trifecta of NFTs as a baseball card or a fractional, I don't know, you know, or a membership pass or ticket, even for ticketing, that can be very practical and, you know, tracking sort of their provenance. You've got utility tokens, which mean points for fan engagement. You've got the security piece. Basically, though, I think the Film 3 movement maybe was a little bit too crypto inward leaning as an audience and didn't have the right infrastructure. Whereas I think what we're trying to do at Republic Film is similar to what Mag was saying, is like first and foremost, offer a new financing channel, which is a huge need. And then we can sort of, you know, scale in additional use cases from utility token NFT technology. And I also think it's about, first of all, you know, what we're doing at Republic Film is really proving the legitimacy of this to Hollywood and to the wider retail audience base by starting off with very sort of premium IP. So Pressman Film, the producers behind American Psycho, Wall Street, Bad Lieutenant, The Crow, Thank You for Smoking. You know, it's like, let's make more movies like those again. And that happens through independent financing, taking risks on new and original IP. Robert Rodriguez, let's create action films. Eli Roth, horror films. We've got one that just launched on Republic a few weeks ago as well, which you can check out on republic.com/film, a new type of fan greenlit studio model. And, you know, by establishing, first of all, in like very premium Hollywood classes, we can show that this technology is really here to stay. And then scalability wise, you know, look at the creator economy. These are influencers with YouTube channels with 20, 30, 100 million followers. They have a new power and community, and they no longer need to necessarily, you know, kneel down in front of the studio system. They can use this technology to make their own movie, own their own movie, and then create a licensing bidding war rather than maybe give up all their rights. So again, it's going to appeal to sort of the next class of creators. So I really think we're still at a stage where, you know, crypto and blockchain are the rails for more fan engagement and more productive creativity.
Anything you want to add, Meg or Billy?
Definitely. I think it's really interesting because I think we've mostly been talking about like fan engagement models, which I think is so important in the sense of like buy-in, right? Like you don't really get, you know, authenticity without, you know, people having that skin in the game who will go and effectively be your sellers, get your friends to buy it, post about it, get the social media working on it. I think on the flip side, I think blockchain is very interesting for like private investors, like institutional investors. So for example, you know, when you think about having lending pools or vaults or even like tokenized shares of, you know, vehicles, you're actually allowing lenders to, you know, have, let's say, like de-risk their capital commitment in your stack by being able to transfer that or sell it off on secondaries. So, you know, and that's where primarily, like I would say I'm focused on, like from an infrastructure standpoint, is making that available for crypto investors or crypto family offices and institutional funds. But that ties directly into the fan funded model, right? Where they're able to transfer that if they wanted to, if they, you know, no longer believe like there is a market for it. But you know, if they wanted to increase their commitments, there's also a market for it. And I think that level of capital efficiency is just something that never existed prior to having blockchain technology, which I think is just really important to kind of point out.
I would love to ask all of you now to make this even a little bit more tangible for everyone who's listening. What are some KPIs, some success stories, some numbers that you could share with us that really show how this model performs better in your case?
I could give an example of there's an artist that we work with. He's actually our first artist on the platform. His name's Lil Russell. He's a Bay Area artist, and this is an artist who, when we started working with him, he was making about $10,000 a year from streaming, which is fairly decent streaming revenue. He's in his first 30 days on the platform, he made $100,000 from about 4,000 fans. And you know, just last week, he launched a campaign where you can essentially pay $1,000 to be invited to a backyard show at his house essentially. He sold, I think, 250 tickets in 48 hours. And again, still not, he doesn't even have 1 million monthly listeners on streaming platforms, but he's been able to build a community where he brings his fans in, bringing them essentially to his home. And he's been able to build such a successful business for himself and his team based around bringing his community in. And the truth is, I mean, tied to kind of to your other question, Mark, around like how big can this get? I think the future isn't about how big it can get, it's about community and niche. And I think we're starting to see those silos around can you bring people in? Because ultimately, the last 10 years was about distribution. Now it's really about retention, right? It doesn't matter if you have 1 million followers. If you have no engagement, what do those 1 million followers mean? But if you have 100,000 followers, but 50,000 of those people are engaged, I think that's really more powerful, and you're going to see more volume across the board. I think especially in music, it's really about that. We're seeing those conversations where we are now a metric of success for our labels and distributors who are ultimately our partner, where they can now see an artist release on Even, make $5,000-$6,000 in a day, and this artist isn't even cracking 10,000 streams in a week. The label can say there's clearly something happening here, and then next thing you know, 3 months later, this artist is blowing up on every playlist. So I think capturing community is really the core part that the industry is really trying to figure out. And again, we're seeing that across different verticals as well, but I do think that is the future of the space. And I think it's not just in music, it's probably across all verticals, focusing on community and engagement. And then, of course, that ties into commerce. But that's how we're measuring success.
I can say quickly, Republic Film has facilitated over $30 million now from 35,000 retail investors into these film projects that previously, were never open to really the retail unlocking, all that retail capital. And, I think a huge, if people ask why do this, it's always easier to get maybe capital from one person. It's like, well, the product does better. If you're another even celebrity launching your next tequila brand, like you might as well what if there was under the buy now button, there was an invest now button to co-invest with your favorite talent, and then that product does better as well because you have an audience telling their friends and family to go buy it, so because they're financial stakeholders too. So it's sort of chipping away at the inadequacies of the current revenue model. And the significant now number of investors and projects that we've helped make, even in music, actually, even like Little Pump, back in the day, he also raised $500,000 to share royalties of one song with his fans. I think these are just new. These numbers are starting to, we're trying to normalize this culture of what tokenization can do.
Mm-hmm. And Billy, any success story that you have that you can share with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we first started off, pretty much primarily working with YouTube and content creators. We've since branched out into helping fund Roblox studios on like Roblox game acquisition. We've started working with, really large kind of artists. In total, we've done around $7 million in financing. And we are, in the process of, doing a much larger round in order to kind of upsize that based on the health of the loans and as well as the investments that we've been able to make. So we're very excited about that. But really, I think, there's so much to do, right? Like, if you think about TikTok shops, if you think about, things like Kick, even like Udemy, all of these are, natural digital royalties that exist. And to Mark's point, they're small businesses, right, that you can effectively go and fund. And not only can you fund, you can participate, right? And because you are an active community in that member. And so we really believe in this model. And I think when it comes to being able to allow content creators to grow their businesses, we just believe in fast capital, in helping them be able to stand these things up. And having the right compliance in place so that lenders have that institutional level of confidence in this new level of media IP. And so that's why we think the infrastructure side is so important, because in order to get, really large size checks to come in, you have to make sure that it's done right, it's done properly, and that the infrastructure is there with the visibility and transparency. And that's also what blockchain provides.
Before we jump into the Q&A, I would love to touch a little bit on technology. I know we said before, technology for the end user is not really important. They just care about whether it works. But we all know, who've been in the space for a while, there are a lot of different blockchains, a lot of different layer ones, a lot of different philosophies. And I would just be curious why all of you have chosen Avalanche specifically as your underlying infrastructure.
I can go first. We didn't start with Avalanche. I think when we initially launched our MVP, and we never really wanted to get married with a blockchain. I think for us, it was like we didn't want to be pushed anything into doing anything we didn't want to do. And the reason why we ended up making the decision to like go into a long-term relationship with Avalanche was really the team, honestly, the people. I know that might be cliche and also a boring answer, but of course, the technology, of course, hits every single checkbox. But for me, it's really the people on top of that. Working with a team of folks who understand culture, and even in the moments where they might not understand, they go out of their way to ask questions and learn. So yeah, just a huge kudos to everyone at the Avalanche team that we work with. The Ava Cloud team is incredible. Helping us launch our L1 was like, again, I was terrified about launching our own L1, but that team made it incredibly easy for us to work with. And the way that they really care about incubating projects and companies internally, and go out of their way to offer resources, I think is incredible. So yeah, I think for me, it's really the people. Might be a boring answer, maybe too emotional, but yeah, I truly appreciate them.
Yeah, I can definitely jump in here. So, we've been working with Avalanche, especially since our enterprise software days. So we've kind of seen firsthand like how fast they've been able to grow. Like, I think fees went from like 99x down, since when we first started working with them. So, when we think about financial infrastructure, we're really thinking about like institutional level capability. If we're going to be moving, hundreds of $1 million of debt, you need a lot of trust, right? You need networks that don't go down and are fully decentralized, right? And I think these are things that, might not seem like very obvious, but when you go to a lender, like, those are the first thing that, they care about, especially with kind of the taboo on crypto, with where, let's say private equity, hedge funds, or private credit funds, and where their heads are at. So that one, especially kind of made a no-brainer, for us to be working with Avalanche. And then, I would definitely say like the L1 technologies are very interesting because, for example, if we needed to plug into Mag's system, right, on Even, we are now like natively interoperable. And so like this whole connectivity into the hundreds of L1s that Avalanche has, and the networks that are then being built out, on these kind of offshoots, also makes it a lot more sensible and future-proof, for the type of kind of financing that we're looking to do. So I think for those two reasons, it was kind of a no-brainer, for us to start on Avalanche.
Oh, Mark, you're muted. Wait. Good now? Yeah.
Sorry, Avalanche. No, I was gonna say no. For all these similar reasons, apart from their sort of efficiency and scalability, they are very mission aligned and really just a great partner to work with. They also believe in enabling RWAs, and extending the opportunities for everyone to get involved with these culture asset classes. And they've been great partners, with their very unique sort of technology around Hollywood sort of focused subnets and things like that each of our issuers can have. And we really kicked off, the new tokenized revenue sharing film vertical with Avalanche, Pressman Film, Robert Rodriguez. These are tokenized revenue share slates, first of its kind ever to be built on Avalanche, and we're very proud of that. So thank you to the team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. And we're already 45 minutes in, and this has been a super interesting discussion. I feel like we only scratched the surface. We got a couple of questions in here. The first one I would like to show is this one for Mac. Just searching for that here. Mag, how relevant are the superfans in today's music industry? Superfans used to be 2 to 5% of an artist's audience, driving 80% of all revenue.
I mean, it's so important. I think, I mean, it's the biggest buzzword in music right now, superfans. I think a lot of it is tied to the data now shows that streaming is plateauing. The growth rates are not increasing at the same rates. Although most of the growth is happening across the global south, it's not happening at the same rate that was projected even 10 years ago. And the industry is looking for new models of how they're going to essentially grow their business. And this is, of course, labels, distributors, and superfans are a core part of that effort. Now, the thing with superfans is they're very smart. They understand when something feels inauthentic. They understand when something is just being sold to them. So doing it in a way that keeps the fan in mind and helps them, you know, do the transaction without them feeling like they're just being sold something for the sake of being sold something. We are in a world where every artist's album has 10 different variations of the vinyl with different colors. And again, that was exciting 2-3 years ago. We are starting to see that fan fatigue. And I think we are seeing an elevated push for the global south and how we can give those fans experiences and access where they traditionally don't get access. And that's really where Even ties in. We spend a lot of time focusing on adding additional payment methods to the platform, different currencies. I always talk about this. Arabic is the most underserved language on the internet. How do we make those things accessible to these consumers around the world, where they can, of course, spend money, but also get access to community and proximity to their favorite artists? So yeah, I think superfans make a, I mean, one, just to throw a stat out there that's Even specific, 43% of fans on Even pay above the minimum price. And that number is growing month over month. All of our releases are in a pay what you want model where the artist sets the minimum price and then fans could go above and beyond. Every single day we see fans pay hundreds, thousands for a single album or release. We've seen fans pay over $5,000 for an album. So this is part of the reason why we're attracting artists like Chance the Rapper, Vic Mensa, of course, Lil Russell, J. Cole, Ryan Leslie. We're seeing these artists that are innovators in the space come to Even because they see that that's where the culture and also the technology and the future of the space going. So it's a space where fans feel good and where artists feel good as well. But yes, somebody just dropped it in here, and I think this is super important. Shout out Carrie. It's important to give stuff away for free. Everything does not need to be monetized all the time. Engagement first, commerce second. That is 100% a core part of what we do as well. Especially we're more developing artists. You have to be very sensible, and accessibility is also really important. Making sure that it's something is price sensitive for the consumers. And one of the things that we do offer is regional pricing, where you can set your pricing based on the country that your fans are in. So maybe it's $10 in the US, but maybe it's 3,000 Naira in Nigeria or 40 pesos in Mexico. It's really important to make sure that it's accessible to fans from around the world. Hopefully that not too long-winded.
Thanks, Mag. And then I have a question coming in is, what advice would you give an independent movie studio or an artist or a creator who might be tiptoeing and listening to this, who hasn't heard of blockchain before and who wants to try it out?
What advice to a independent movie filmmaker, let's say, who wants to try out sort of what we're talking about, but is still a little bit apprehensive about I think I think what we're all sort of aligning on is that, you know, the blockchain is sort of the rails, like kind of, you know, how your computer works. You just want it to work. You don't necessarily need to know. I think you have to focus on what the need and the narrative is here. You know, tokenization is so broad, and what we're talking about, you know, it could be for fan engagement, building community. It could be getting a project financed. And I think all of us are pretty aligned in trying to make this technology be as accessible and usable as possible. So I'd say, know that we are all sort of, regulated, doing things the right way, differently from what some folks did in 2021. And it's really about understanding what we can do for you, and we'll take care of the tech.
I think Angelica here in the audience just reached out to you, Mark. She wants to get started with Republic. You, Billy, and Meg, any advice you would give creators or artists?
Yeah, I could go really quickly. I think probably the number one advice that we give artists every day is like, start now. I think, and by start now, I mean, start creating, of course, but also start monetizing your work and make it available. If you're a filmmaker, and again, maybe it's just bootstrapping a short film, like you should be on Republic and starting with your community. It might just be your friends and family at first. But there's, of course, an opportunity to grow from there. And I think it also makes it real. I think what we see at Even is, I love working with the big artists, but nothing beats helping an artist make their first $100, their first $1,000. What that does for their morale, but I think more importantly, what it does for their creative is really important, because it all of a sudden makes it real. And I think it's important. We've kind of all lived through this generation where, like, we keep hearing that it costs nothing to be a creative, and basically content should just be free. I think there's gonna be a huge shift that happens over the span of the next 10, 20 years, and I'm just glad to be surrounded by folks like Billy and Mark, who are a part of that good fight in the space to help really creators reach their goals.
Cool, thank you, Meg. And I see people reaching out. Meg, where's the best place to DM you, please? I think we're already 52 minutes in. This was really, really interesting. Thank you, everyone here in the panel, Meg, Mark, and Billy, for joining. And thank you, everyone in the audience. The discussion, of course, continues wherever you are. I think we make it easy for people. Meg, Mark, Billy, can you quickly share where can people best reach out to you?
Definitely LinkedIn would be the best place for me. So let me just drop it in the chat.
Yeah.
Same thing, LinkedIn.
For me, if you write sort of info@republic.com, anything film related will come to me. So I see some questions. I'm sorry that I missed here. Craig, I haven't heard of this project, so please do email. And same with the question about the studio in Mexico, Angelica. Looking forward to continue discussion, everyone. Thank you.
Perfect. And if you want to build on AVAX, reach out to the AVAX team. They're really, really good. Here's the email, enterprise@avalabs.org. Again, thank you everyone for joining. This was super cool, and I wish you all the best, and talk soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.